Hello everybody, it's me, Donna, and I'm going to be reading the um, Revocation, the spiritual contract revocations that were written by Andrew Bartzis. And I'm going to just read them aloud so that you can listen to them and repeat them yourself. So I'm going to start with the contract removal for media systems. Now I'm going to try and remember to say it in small segments so that you can repeat after I say it. So rather than going through and reading it and then repeating it, you can just listen to it here and then say it aloud yourself. So, the contract removal for media systems. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, and future beings, selves, and existences in this dimension and time stream, and all time streams above and below the earth-centric sine wave of coexistence. At this exact moment, in the ever-present co-creating moment, I summon all DNA lineage ancestors to create a unified, proper spiritual court of equity so I may find remedy and resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I call forth the proper spiritual court of equity to hear my decree of contract removal. I revoke all spiritual contracts with earth-based media systems, using domination and control as a means of energy harvesting, fear instigation, or reality manipulation with energetic propaganda technologies. I call forth all ancestors of all soul relations to hold space in this spiritual court of equity. I call to Mother Earth and all her light denizens within all inner and outer space to come forward and occupy this spiritual court of equity. O great mystery, who is the source of all power, I call to you. Come with your sacred synchronicity so all beings may hold space with unity consciousness. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all media personalities that do not have full use of free will and full knowledge of our DNA ancestry. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all media agencies, corporations and media-based family crests. I hereby revoke all spiritual contract assumptions, presumptions, and statistical models that predict my habit patterns through the use of commercial advertising, intertwined with the system of domination and control. I do not consent to etheric grid broadcasting over public airwaves, television, internet, radio, and any other means or methods that propagate propaganda for mass consumption. I do not consent to predictive modeling by etheric or commercial means. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all media-based sacred geometry buildings I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with the sacred geometry media presidents, shareholders, news anchors, news reporters, pundits, talking heads, and all representations of government officials within the entire global media network. You have no power over me with your presumptions of knowledge. We are manifesting, co-creating spirits. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all news regurgitating systems, crawlers, websites, search engines, print media, and all forms of etheric propaganda used within all these systems. I revoke all presumptions of consent with all media agencies. I revoke all assumptions with all advertising agencies that are funded by the system of domination and control. I do not consent with any advertising systems targeting soul groups, soul migrations, or the spiritual incarnation process. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that limit the genetic free-willed expression of all sentient kind. I revoke all spiritual contracts that define the media as our tellers of oral traditions or generational teachers. I revoke all contracts with the sacred geometry satellite broadcasting system. I revoke all contracts with etheric artificial intelligences that use sacred geometry satellite systems as a means to hijack my information stream. I do not consent to psychic monitoring or influencing from any media system that services the system of domination and control. I hereby demand the instant removal of all broadcast-based psychic parasites and their propagation and harvesting system that creates herds of psychic parasites. I revoke all contracts that use my life force as a false form of consent for the propagation and spreading of psychic parasite with all my DNA soul relations. I hereby revoke all soul contracts that grant the media power to last beyond one generation of history. I demand all rights of generational knowledge be returned to the soul family structure. I demand the return of our history in a complete and transparent manner, so there shall no longer be secrets kept from our people. I hereby revoke all rights, duties, responsibilities, and current actions of all media personalities. Your services are no longer required. I revoke all privileges that grant the media families any power over my soul contracts, soul family, or soul-based migration patterns. I revoke all rights to any media system based in domination and control from ever returning within my soul family structure of all past, present, and future lives. I hereby demand the instant cessation and removal of all false, information from all media. I hereby demand that any and all future distribution of information over all forms of media absolutely embodies truth, integrity, and transparency in perpetuity. I hereby declare that Earth Mother is now in dominion with me for all local or mass media information exchange systems. I call forth all the ancestors to honor this reading of my free will and to enter it into the Earth Akashic record for all sentient kind. To understand our freedom comes with the use of free will at all times. And that's the end of the first one. Again, these were written by Andrew Bartzis. You can find them on his website if you just care to read them yourself. I'm recording them so that I can just re-listen to them myself without having to reread them. Revocation of banking systems is the next one. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, and future beings, selves and existence in this dimension and time stream, all time streams, above and below the earth-centric sine wave of coexistence. At this exact moment, in the ever-present co-creating moment, I summon all DNA lineage ancestors to create a unified, proper spiritual court of equity, so I may find remedy and resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I call to the four elements: air, earth, water, and fire. I call forth the spiritual court of equity with all ancestors in union with the migration patterns of all souls' families incarnating on Earth Mother. I call the primary ancestor spirits of Earth Mother to come into this spiritual court of equity, to hold space for the reading and removal of all contracts dealing with the energetic exchange of value systems. I call forth the Earth Global Dreamtime. I call to the unified Dreamtime societies of all Earth to come to this spiritual court of equity, to provide their complete wisdom to this sacred moment in which I reclaim my sovereign spirit authority for all exchange of energy for value systems. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with the primary banking families. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all banking family crests. I revoke, remove, and dissolve all banking family trusts that use my name as a number for energy harvesting. I revoke all assumed rights used by the DNA-based kingship, lordship, or manor role contracts that function within all banking families. I hereby state, I do not consent to rule by the few. I do not consent to rule by the banking families. I do not consent with the assumed authority of the banking families funding the free court systems. I revoke all rights, privileges, and rules created by the family crest-based or DNA lineage-based banking families to dominate and control the free court system. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that define the bank system as being intertwined with my free will. I revoke all fine print within all of my soul contracts, past, present, and future, that deal with any banking system as a 3D matrix, debt collection, or energy harvesting system. I demand the instant repayment of all energy and 3D matrix representations of value. I do not consent to the use of corrupt courts as a means of judgment. I revoke all rights of 3D-based courts' assumptions of power with any 3D exchange for value systems created for the follies of the banking families. I hereby revoke all consent of ink-based, web-based, or energy-based signature harvesting systems. I revoke all rights to use my 3D matrix signature to represent me in any court system, spiritual or 3D matrix. I do not consent to the use of my soul contracts as a means of energy harvesting from any of the primary banking systems created by the primary soul contract holding banking families. I revoke all rights to use my name in any form of banking family coat of arms contracts. I demand the instant and permanent erasure of all signatures used to represent me in the banking exchange for value system. I do not consent to the use of my life force for any exchange for value banking system that is not completely transparent with all transactions, spiritual or 3D matrix. I hereby state that all bank-based buildings using sacred geometry have no power over my sovereign free will. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all banking systems that use sacred geometry as a means of energy harvesting or a tool for domination and control. I revoke all rights, privileges, and assumptions with all buildings that use sacred geometry as fine print, soul contract enforcement systems. I do not consent to any sacred geometry building to house, hold, or transfer any of my life force to any banking system on all of Earth's timelines and or coexisting dimensions. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with all sacred geometry systems that use my life force without direct consent from me and all of my soul family ancestors in complete agreement. I revoke all rights, assumptions, and rules that create a new sacred geometry banking system. I hereby declare that all banking families and systems are now banished from operating in secret, covert or overt ways to harvest my energy in any way, shape, or form. I hereby declare that Earth Mother is now in dominion with me for all energy exchange for value systems. I call forth all the ancestors to honor this reading of my free will and enter it into the Earth Akashic record. For all sentient kind to understand how freedom comes with the use of free will at all times. Revocation of government. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, and future being selves and existence in this dimension and time stream, all time streams, above and below the Earth-centric sine wave of coexistence. At this exact moment, in the ever-present, co-creating moment, I summon all DNA lineage ancestors to create a unified, proper spiritual court of equity so I may find remedy and resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that deal with all government personalities, elected and unelected. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all family crest-based government systems. I revoke all rights, duties, and responsibilities to all government entities that use my vote as a means of energy harvesting. I revoke all spiritual contracts with every senator, congressman, ambassador, Supreme Court members, presidents, vice presidents, premiers, prime ministers, and all cabinet members. I revoke all spiritual contracts with every branch of government for all of my past, present, and future lives. I do not consent to the rule of the privileged few. I revoke all rights, responsibilities, assumptions, presumptions, and signatures that retain me within the entirety or any or all government organizations, family crests, sacred geometry buildings, monuments, memorials, or military bases. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with a corporate-run government. I do not consent to any form of corporate government that harvests energy from its people. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with the Federal Reserve families. I revoke all rights, assumptions, and responsibilities with every member of the Federal Reserve and exchange for value systems run by any government or corporate officials. I revoke all spiritual contracts hidden within our government exchange for value systems. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all government offices that use sacred geometry, crests, to retain power or insert fine print in soul contracts. I revoke all rights, privileges, powers, assumed and unassumed, consented and unconsented, with every federal law enforcement branch that uses Federal Reserve energy to support the system of domination and control. I revoke all spiritual contracts that create consent for the government committees that determine quality of life. I revoke all rights, duties, responsibilities for all government systems that write laws that affect my spiritual contracts without my direct consent from my total DNA lineage ancestors, past, present, and future. I revoke all spiritual contracts that enable the government to use time travel as a means of domination and control. I revoke all rights and duties of all time traveler personalities, operations, systems, past, present, and future. I demand the immediate return of all government time travel personalities to their right and perfect timeline. I revoke all rights with all technologies that alter dimensions, manipulate time streams, or do harm to any sentient life forms coexisting on Earth in all timelines and dimensions. I do not consent to timeline wars. I do not consent to mass propaganda. I do not consent with war-based industrial complexes. I do not consent with the use of military to dominate and control. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts secretly interwoven into each and every law, past, present, and future. I do not consent to the passing of laws that affect soul family migrations, soul family immigration, or systems that prevent me from uniting my complete and total soul family. I demand the instant return of all my soul family that has been denied the right to coexist with me for all my past, present, and future lives. I revoke all rights, rules, and laws that define soul family on a 3D matrix level. I return all definitions of soul family status to Earth Mother. I revoke all rights to label soul families with sacred geometry, linguistics that cross dimensions or realities. I revoke all spiritual contracts with all forms of sacred geometry, linguistics past, present, and future. I do not consent to the use of sacred geometry, linguistics as a means of energy harvesting. I do not consent to the use of geometry cities, of sacred geometry cities, infrastructure, linguistics, or artwork for the purpose of domination and control. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts that enable the government to dominate and control all people on any timeline or dimension in Earth Mother's realm. I revoke all assumptions and presumptions of power and caste systems. I revoke all spiritual contracts that define sentient life as cattle or commerce. I do not consent to my life force being used for any purpose that does not heal Earth Mother and promote unity consciousness among all sentient kind, living and coexisting within Mother Earth. I hereby declare that Earth Mother is now in dominion with me for all forms of global government, interpersonal relations, or galactic relations, for all sentient kind, existing and coexisting on Earth Mother's realms. I call forth all the ancestors to honor this reading of my free will and enter it into the Earth Akashic record for all sentient kind to understand our freedom comes with the use of free will at all times. Okay, that's the end of the third. There's two more. I'll record those separately.